Hello there, I'm Tanya Khazanov, and you are listening to Human and Holy. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Torah of life, the lived experience of Judaism, and how that in and of itself is Torah too. This is something that I viscerally experience in my own life, and I know many people do, and it's something that we really explore at Human and Holy, the lived experience of our Judaism, how concepts and ideas that are so pure in nature show up and present in different ways in people's lives and real lived experience. And I came across a gorgeous source from Rus Rabbah, which depicted this idea so beautifully. And it was one that I found so moving, and I wanted to share it with you. And coupled with that was a conversation that I had with my friend Hadassah Shem Tov, who is the founder of Batsheva Learning Center and host of the podcast Real Women, Real Torah. And in that conversation, we were speaking about women's experience of Torah study. And something that came into my mind and entered into our conversation was Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik's essay, Rupture and Reconstruction, the transformation of contemporary orthodoxy. And we got into a conversation there about the distinction between the Mimetic tradition of Judaism and the textual tradition of Judaism. And it all came together so beautifully for me in how we experience the Torah of life and the lived experience of Judaism, and how sacred and holy and how much attention we could give to that, and how much sacredness and presence we could give to the Torah of our lives. Let's dive into the sources. They are such a delight, and I'm excited to share them with you. So in this Rus Rabbah, we have an interesting chronicle of different characters in Tanakh, and how if they had known that their words, their actions, their life experiences were being written within the Torah, they would have acted so much more excitedly and passionately and maybe even a little bit more wholeheartedly in their choices. And an example that's given is Aaron. Had he known that Hashem was dictating his every word, and we see that Aaron came forth to greet Moshe, but if he had known that Hashem was writing it down, he would have come out to meet Moshe with drums and dancing. He wouldn't have just emerged to meet him. He would have come out with the appropriate level of passion and excitement, knowing that his words were becoming canonized in the holy text of the Torah. And had Boaz known that God was writing down his every actions, we see that Boaz gave Rus roasted grains, and she ate and she was satisfied, and there was some left over. But if he had known that his actions were being recorded, he would have fed her fattened calves. He wouldn't have just fed her grains. He would have fed her a more luxurious meal. And we see this record, how if the characters of the Torah had known that their actions were being written within the Torah itself, they would have showed up with bells and whistles. They would have done what they had done, but with, a little bit of extra effort and energy put into it. Now, we know very clearly that the characters of Tanakh became part of the Torah, and they are the characters that we study as models of what it means to be a Jew. Within the Torah, we see the lived experience of Judaism, which became our canonized text. Now, as Jews, we have our lived experience of Judaism. But is that Torah too? Are each of our individual lives actually a continuation of the Torah itself and a writing of that Torah? And the text continues to say, in the past, a person would perform a mitzvah and the prophet would write it down. Now, when a person performs a mitzvah, who writes it? Eliyahu writes it, and Mashiach writes it, and Hashem affixes his seal on it. The life that we live is also being written down as Torah. And Rav Tzadok has a beautiful comment on the beginning of this text, where we say that if they had known that their actions were being written down in the Torah, they would have been able to do it more wholeheartedly. They would have been able to do it with more passion, with more emes, with more wholesomeness. But he comments and says, no, it's precisely the fact that they didn't know that the cameras were on, that they didn't know that they were being recorded, that they didn't know that their life was the Torah, that their life was being written down as the story of the Jewish people. It's precisely the fact that they were in the dark about the significance of the lived experience of their Judaism, that we are able to record it as an authentic expression of their connection with the divine. Because if they had known, and in the example given, if Aaron had known that he was going out to greet Moshe and he was actually writing out the words of the Torah, and he would have come out with drums and not just come out to greet him, it would have been lacking that authenticity. It would have been a performance, not an honest record of the lived experience of Judaism. And the same thing is true in our own lives. As this text continues, in today's day and age, we think our lives are not Torah. The Torah is a thing that was written in the past. But in Rus Rabbah, it says very clearly, Eliyahu is writing it, Mashiach is writing it, and God affixes the seal upon it. We know that there is the Torah of Mashiach that is being written, that is going to be revealed to us when Mashiach comes, the deeper experience of the Torah, which we are writing and revealing in our own lives and experiences. The lived experience of a Jew is being recorded as the Torah of Mashiach. The lived experience of a Jew is being woven into the fabric of the Torah. The Torah is not just something that was written in the past, it is also something that is currently being written in the lived experience of every single person. And in the essay that I mentioned by Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik called Rupture and Reconstruction, and I'll put the source in the show notes, he speaks about how every single time there's a rupture in the Jewish tradition, which there was, for example, after the Spanish Inquisition, or what we had most recently after World War II, there is a rebuilding that we attempt to do of the tradition of the breakage and the rupture that we experienced in our Jewish community. The default transmission of the Torah is not through the text, but it's through life. Most people learn how to live like a Jew, not through looking into the Torah and the text of the Torah and constructing it for themselves and constructing this image of what the lived experience of Judaism is, but actually through seeing models, either from their parents or community members or teachers or leaders or guides or people who just embody the Jewish way of living, and they learn through that how to be a Jew in this world. And one of the examples that he gives is tzitzis, that like in the old world, tzitzis wasn't something you had to measure and have like legal discussions about, but it was simply something that like you put on in the morning the same way you put on your shoes. It was just like, I am a Jew, so tzitzis is an article of clothing that I put on the same way I'm a human being who has feet, so I put socks and shoes on in the morning. It was just so woven into the fabric of life. It didn't need to be a discussion. There didn't need to be legal discussions of how it was going to play out, but we could just see like, this is the Masorah, this is how it is done, this is how it was done by my father or by my community members, so I see what it means to wear tzitzis, and it's very intuitive and instinctive for me to tap into those parts of Judaism. After the shtetl was splintered, after European Judaism was unfortunately demolished in the barbaric way that it was, we came to America and we began to reconstruct our experience of halachic Judaism. And when you no longer have these clear models and these clear community containers that teach you how to live like a Jew, we turn to the text, so the halachic text, and we begin to parse out and try to build a living model of a halachic Jew through the text itself. And what can happen sometimes in that process is that we can develop a very exacting definition of the lived experience of a Jew, because it isn't just modeled after other humans, but is now attempting to construct like a living thing from the texts. We often go to like a very extreme version of the halacha, one that will often take a very exacting reading of the text because we want to make sure that we're getting it right. And there's a very interesting story of a Kiddush cup that I think models this very beautifully, where the Chavetz Chaim's daughter-in-law was hosting a bacher in her house for Shabbos, and she gave him a Kiddush cup to make Kiddush with. One of the examples of a conversation that became very big after World War II that wasn't really something that was really discussed or spoken about in halachic circles was the shear, the amount of wine that a person needs to drink in a Kiddush cup. This was something that wasn't really an intellectual discussion. It was just something that you learned from the people around you, how large the Kiddush cup was in your home, in your father's home, and you did as such. But of course, once that tradition was splintered, now we need to remake something from the text. And the Chazon Ish was someone who was at the forefront of really reconstructing and trying to figure out what is the correct shear, what is the correct amount of wine that a person needs to have in a Kiddush cup. And in this post-war era, we began to ask the question of how much wine do you actually need to drink? What is the halachic minimum for the wine itself? Anyways, the Chavetz Chaim's daughter-in-law is hosting this young bacher at her house for Shabbos. She gives him a Kiddush cup to make Kiddush with. And he says, I need a larger cup. This cup is not the shear, according to the halachic ruling. This cup is not large enough. It does not hold enough wine. So she went and got him another Kiddush cup. When she brought him another Kiddush cup, she says, I just want you to know that original Kiddush cup that I gave you, that was the Chavetz Chaim's Kiddush cup. And he used that to make Kiddush his entire life. In Rupture and Reconstruction by Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik, Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik speaks about two types of traditions in Judaism. One is the Mimetic tradition, and one is the textual tradition. The Mimetic tradition comes from the word miming, where we literally learn our tradition by miming and studying other people who really live and embody their Judaism around us. And this is what happens when there's like a real, whole, lived experience of Judaism that we have access to. So in the shtetl, where people were completely surrounded by the lived experience of Judaism, and where we had these nuclear families where we could learn from the Rav of the town, where we could learn from our mothers and fathers, like what it meant to dress like a Jew, talk like a Jew, keep Shabbos like a Jew, prepare for Shabbos like a Jew. We could look to our neighbors to see what does it mean to pray like a Jew, to walk like a Jew, to act like a Jew in every single area. And because we had such a rich Mimetic tradition, because we had so many people around us who lived their Judaism in such an authentic way, who truly like embodied embodied Shabbos, embodied tznius, embodied kosher, embodied all of these areas that are very rich halachically. We didn't necessarily need to look within the text to find the exact ruling for it because we just saw it modeled. And in ways, there's a lot more softness to it because human beings, when you watch someone keep Shabbos, it is not as overwhelming as when you read the endless books that you could on the halachos of Shabbos. When you watch a person live like a Jew, you can absorb so much about what it means to be a Jew without necessarily having to enter into the text to study and try to determine what exactly are the red lines here. And in this experience of Mimetic Judaism, we have an organic, intuitive connection to halacha where we literally absorb it from our mothers and our fathers and our community members and just all the gorgeous models that we have around us of people who truly embody halachic Judaism and a connection to Shabbos and kashrus and taras mishpacha and all of the really foundational parts of Judaism. Now, what happens is that when that Mimetic tradition is ruptured, when that model of Judaism, where we are surrounded by so many people who live their Judaism in such authentic ways, where they're truly just like, I put on tzitzis because I'm a Jew. And so therefore we learn how to put on tzitzis. And if it's, what does it mean to be a Jewish woman? We can have all these intellectual conversations about it. But I know for myself that the most powerful learnings that I've had in this area was watching a Jewish woman and thinking to myself, this is what a Jewish woman is. And we can have all of these text-based conversations where people are drawing from the text to prove a point or, choose a certain derech or path in life. And it always will fall flat in the face of a true embodiment of halacha, a true embodiment of a person in a relationship with Hashem and truly showing up in this world as a Jew. On the other hand, we have no choice but to reconstruct it to some degree from the text. The textual tradition is something that is necessary for us to experience, and obviously the Torah is alive and does have so much for us to draw from, and the trouble is not for us to be reaching for the text for answers or for an understanding of how to live like a Jew. The Torah is our source, it is our soul's food, and it is what nurtures us as spiritual beings in this world. And it has to be accompanied by the lived experience of our Judaism. It can't be something that is looked at in isolation. We are not just a textual tradition, we are also a mimetic tradition. We are a tradition that is tapped into through so many models and examples of what it means to be a Jew and to be connected to Hashem in real, embodied, integrated ways. An example that Dr. Soloveitchik gives of this is Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, who just stubs his toe and naturally calls out to God. And that record of a Jew just stubbing their toe and calling out to Hashem as just being the most natural reaction for a Jew is I stub my toe and I call out to Hashem. And we've seen a shift where the yeshiva has become more of a central piece in Jewish life than the home has, where the home used to be the center of Judaism in terms of really teaching and embodying Judaism, but now we have turned to the books as the central focus of our Judaism. And obviously, again, the text is such a rich and important part of our Judaism, and it is specifically our connection to the text that has kept us for so long. We always want to ensure that the text is also being embodied and taught through the lived experience of Judaism, and that there is absolutely no replacement for the lived experience in passing on Judaism to the next generation. And if our Judaism is trying to be constructed and built from the pages alone, and not also through having relationships with other Jews who model having a connection with God in a real way, then we might fall into more extreme versions of Judaism that might not necessarily be true to that essence, that organic relationship with God, where a Jew stubs their toe and calls out to Hashem. And Dr. Soloveitchik ends this essay by saying, sometimes we seek to feel God's yoke rather than feeling his embrace. And in the Mimetic tradition of Judaism, you often feel God's embrace. You feel the love that a Jew has for her creator. You feel the love that a Jew has for her Judaism and for being able to experience Hashem in daily life and through the intricate experience of mitzvos. And sometimes when we become completely absorbed within the text and we lose the connection to the lived experience of Judaism, our Judaism could begin to feel more like a yoke than an embrace. Now, obviously, we learn that God's home in this world is specifically through the 4 cubits of halacha, that halacha is where we experience God's presence in our lives. The Mimetic tradition of Judaism, the Judaism that we learn through the lived experience of other Jews and models of what it means to live with halacha, is not a non-halachic way of experiencing Judaism. It is the most halachic way of experiencing Judaism, but there's just a softness to the transmission because it is being modeled by human beings. It's not as dry as the text, but it's a lived halacha, and lived halacha is very different and very rich and alive in a way that sometimes the constructed halacha, just from the sources themselves, don't have the humanity of a human being who's actually doing them and showing up and embodying these concepts in their life. Every Jewish holiday has a Masechta that's correlated with it to explain what that holiday is. And the Rus Rabbah says that the word Masechta is from the root word mesech, which means curtain or screen. And he says that the light of a holiday is hidden within the Masechta. You have to penetrate the screen of the text in order to discover the true essence and light of that holiday. There is only one holiday that does not have a Masechta that's correlated to it, and that is the holiday of Shavuos. Shavuos is the essential covenant between us and the Torah. It is when we received the gift of the Torah in our lives that we experience every single day in our bones. And for this holiday, there's no Masechta because there's no screen. There's nothing that we need to penetrate. There's nothing that we need to decipher. It's just our lives. It's the gift of our lives and that visceral experience of our Judaism that each of us have. It's the Torah of our lives, of embodied Judaism, of halakha, as it plays out in the Jewish experience, the soul seeking to be connected to Hashem in a very real way in our individual lives. Each of us have a natural and organic feeling of Hashem. Each of us have a soul inside that has a very strong voice and that yearns to be connected to its source, to be one with the Creator, to truly absorb and receive the gift of the Torah in our lives. We don't have to construct this. We have to embody it. Every single moment of our lives is an opportunity for us to truly live out what it means to be a Jew in this world. And just like Rav Tzadok says, commenting on that Rus Rabbah, where if only the characters of Tanakh would have known that their words were being written, they would have acted with so much more passion and excitement. It's precisely the fact that we don't realize that our lives are being written down as Torah, that the life of a Jew is crafting that Mimetic tradition. And by the way, it's not just being written down in the Torah of Mashiach, it's being written down in the Torah of your descendants, in the Torah of your students, in the Torah of your community members. Every single person who chooses to show up and really live like a Jew in this world is creating an environment and a future for Judaism that is literally modeled after you and after your life. And there's no question that if you're in any position of influence, then just your lived experience of your Judaism is Torah that others are studying. And we see this throughout time, that students studied the lives of their teachers, and many of us study the lives of others around us to glean what it means to live like a Jew. And we look at the greats, the people who are so absorbed within their relationship with Hashem, and we learn so much about what it means to live like a Jew. And we hear from so many women on this podcast about what it means for them to live with their divine souls, what it means to live with God, what it means to live with the Torah in our lives in a very true way. The text has kept the Jewish people for so long, and Jews have kept the Torah for so long, not just by studying it, but by embodying it, by leaning into the soul's expression of Torah in our lives. I heard the Lubavitch Rebbe quoted as saying that the lullaby that a mother sings her children to sleep with is Torah too. We often think about Torah in a very linear way, the text of the Torah and the holy words that are written there. But if we can orient ourselves to our own lives and to see that our lives are Torah too. The lullabies we sing our children to sleep with are Torah too. Our days spent searching for God in 1,000 mundane moments are Torah too. Our struggles, our humanity, the ways that we are wrestling with and exploring our faith, this is Torah too. This is Avraham searching for God, smashing the idols, wanting to be connected in that way. The ways that we show up for each other with kindness and love, the way that we are seeing the Jewish people showing up for each other right now, this is Torah too. The life of a Jew is Torah. It is being written in the Torah of Mashiach by Eliyahu, by Mashiach, and it is being sealed by God. It is becoming part of the written Torah itself, and more than that, it is becoming part of the fabric of what it means to be a Jewish person. Other people are looking at us to see, what does it mean to walk in the world like a Jew? Our children look at us, our students look at us. We can look in the mirror and say, am I embodying what it means to be a Jew? When I stub my toe, what comes out? This is Torah too. The lived experience of a Jew has always been just as much the Torah of Judaism, the continuity of Judaism, the ways that we keep the Torah, the ways that we genuinely show up in our lives in an organic and authentic, intuitive relationship with Hashem, and all those in-between moments of our lives that often don't feel spiritual and don't feel sacred, but are also a record of an individual connecting and calling out to Hashem, of a soul truly being nurtured by the oneness of God, and are teaching everyone around us, just as the Torah seeks to, what it means to truly live tapped into the oneness of the Creator in this world. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
אלוקיי זכינינה בתורתך ובמצוותיך לחבר את נשמתי תמיד אליך לחבר תמיד אליך